Will Work for Patients, episode 39.
I took the big leap of faith, and that's where you jump, the net will form. And I spent the next 5 years of my life 200 miles outside of my comfort zone. In a very short time, I was seeing 50 a week, then 100 a week, then 150, 175. I broke 200. And he said, oh, you can't. And this huge BS meter just popped in my brain saying, no, it can be done. These screening sites, I'd be back on my fifth time. And that person I saw the very first time would finally come back and say, right, this is something I need to have a look at. The events that I would do, people would walk up and just say, hey, you're that chiropractor I saw. What can you do for my neck pain? Each one of those hellos was like a little seed for the future. When you're on fire, people will come to watch you burn.
What up, Will Workers? Frank Sardella here, and I am completely pumped to speak with my special guest today, who is going to tell it straight on how being born in Davenport, Iowa didn't stop him from failing in practice, but through smarts, intuition, and the foresight to change with the times and innovate, made him a success in practice and able to reach out to other practice owners too. So sit tight, listen hard, and prepare to have your mind blown with the advice that could be the game changer for you. Today's episode is entitled, When You're on Fire, People Will Come to Watch You Burn. Here we go.
Thanks for tuning in for another episode of Will Work for Patients, a free advice podcast dedicated to help chiropractors get on purpose and grow their practices. Get ready to tune in and turn up the volume of your practice marketing. And now, turning up the volume on his mic, big-time chiropractic advocate and your host, here is Frank Sardella.
Hey, that's me, and that's my cue to rock out another bodacious episode of the show. So hello, and it's great to be back. How are you today, Will Workers? Thanks for joining me for another wrap session on practice growth and expansion. And man, I hate to sound like a broken record, but do I have an episode planned for you today. Before we get to that, though, I continue doing these corporate events, and I'm overwhelmed by the amount of stress some of the youngest people I've ever met professionally are suffering from. Perhaps more importantly, doing nothing about people. I have so much to share on that, which you will undoubtedly hear in the upcoming episodes. I promise to continue to share, but it is blowing me away, and I'm really eager to share it with you. You need to get out there and start connecting with these people and finding a way to get them in your office and treating them. And speaking of episodes, we have now launched the new Will Work for Patients website, where you can find pages of every episode, complete with show notes, links, perks, all kinds of goodies that I have cooked up for you. So please visit willwork4patients.com. That's willwork, the number 4, patients.com, and find all the information you're looking for, including all the links to our social media accounts. So please follow, like, connect, follow us on the social media, all right? And one last thing before we kick it with today's guest, I'd just like to take 60 seconds to thank the ones who are making this episode possible. Good help is hard to find. How do you find that one gem, let alone keep them? Besides, aren't they working for someone else? Face it, you're looking for a clone of you who can do what you can do. What if several clones of you showed up right now? What could you accomplish? What would it mean to your practice? Clones are made, not found. So are staff members. Fortunately, someone can help you make them. Introducing basic staff training by my friends at Effective Management. No, they're not geneticists, but they're out to duplicate your actions as well as those used by top-notch administrators, instilling them in your staff, building you a team of on-purpose, confident staff gems and valuable to expansion. Here is an easy-to-follow system that takes minutes a day with your staff, turning them into an effective, supportive team without your even being there. I love their systemic innovation based on experience. In fact, I've witnessed even some of the most defiant staff becoming truly valuable to practices implementing basic staff training. I recommend you visit effectivemanagement.net and take advantage of their free 8-point business analysis revealing key areas of your practice keeping you from building that team and prohibiting your true potential growth. Visit effectivemanagement.net or call 551-804-7243. Build that support team you need to help you achieve your practice goals. Find out about basic staff training today. All right. What are we going to cover today? Well, let me tell you about my guest. My guest today may be a best-selling author on Amazon with his book about pain management and a leading media expert helping practices increase their marketing for their niche. He is also a successful chiropractor and practice owner in his own right. But the story doesn't end there. And according to him, and I quote, "It wasn't all roses and blue ribbons along the way." My guest has had to pull the plug, retool, and start all over again in practice. He's made many mistakes, As have we all, haven't we, Will Workers? I know I have. Crossing over from an ancient age of marketing into a digital age, getting certifications and training as well as applying some personal intuition and innovation, he solved his own practice growth problems to finally find his success in private practice. Today, still running his Pacific Northwest practice, he is helping patients get well through the power of chiropractic, but practice owners facing growth challenges as well through use of his products and services he himself uses. Now, I know I say this all the time, but I could truly go on and on about this one. I don't even know how I'm going to pack it into one episode, but let's let her rip, shall we? So please welcome to Will Work for Patients, Dr. Jerry Dreesen. Welcome to the show, Jerry. Say hello.
Thanks, Frank. It's an honor to be here, especially in the beginnings of what's going to be an awesome series that you've been putting together for everyone.
Oh, shucks, Jerry, I'm not worthy. Well, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm sure our audience would rather hear it from you. So could you just tell your story from your standpoint of how you got into practice and sort of where it went from there?
Sure. Let's hear. I guess I'll start from the beginning. I was born into chiropractic. My dad was a chiropractor. He graduated in Davenport, which is where I was born, Davenport, Iowa. Moved out to Seattle. He started his practice, had a successful practice, taught me how to adjust when I was about 14 to adjust him. And it was definitely something I wanted to do. I did have the time, kind of a crossroad as far as where I wanted to go. I had a background in graphic arts, chiropractic, and I had a ton of other things that I wanted to do as well. And I knew that if I became a chiropractor, I would eventually be able to do these other things, but I'd never be able to be a chiropractor. Became a chiropractor, went into practice with my dad and my brother, and for 8 years got stuck at probably seeing anywhere from 10 to 19 patients a week. I was literally the bottom of the totem pole on the rotation, and I didn't really know how to build a practice. My dad had already had a flourishing practice, so he would pull up the 3x5 cards and call his patients and ask them how they were doing. And his quote was, "As long as you have a busy Monday, the rest of your week will be busy." And so I would call my 10 patients, have them come in on a Monday, and then that was it. So for a long time, I didn't know what else to do. And I also, as people will find out, I was also a magician too, and semi-retired. But I was doing a magic show, and a chiropractor who was in the area, a very famous chiropractor too, asked me how I was doing, and I decided to tell him the truth and say, not too good. And he said, "Well, have you ever thought about getting a coach?" And I thought, what? He said, Michael Jordan has a coach. He doesn't need one, but he has one. He needs somebody to show him what he's doing wrong and to put it out in front of him. So I went on a wild goose chase, but I nailed it down, found some really good coaches, started jumping into their systems and learning procedures that work. And from that, I took the big leap of faith, and that's where you jump, the net will form. You jump first, the net will follow. That's exactly what happened. And I jumped out into my own practice. I basically had 3 months of a time bomb ticking as to when my loans that I had taken out would come in. But I did everything. I told my coaches, I said, "I'm going to do every single thing you tell me, and if I fail, it's going to be your fault." And they put me to the task, and I spent literally the next 5 years of my life 200 miles outside of my comfort zone, doing everything. And I was probably 45 hours in clinic and 30 hours a week outside the clinic doing screenings. And that's what I love about your program, is it's back to the basics. And I would find out that in my screenings that if I could ask 100 people at any screening event, I was guaranteed to get anywhere from 2 to 3 new patients. You ask, you screen, you set, they show, and you treat. And that was kind of the ratio. And so one of my secrets is I'd get one of those little golf clickers, and anytime somebody would come by, I'd set it at 0, and I'd go in, it'd be in my pocket, and ask somebody if they'd like to get their back checked. And if they said no or yes, I would click it. And my goal was not to leave that spot until I had 100 clicks. And I had another person with me, and so the two of us, we would see who could get the most clicks in an hour, kind of a thing. So that's what made it exciting as well, because we had a hidden goal. We could hear the clicks. Nobody knew what that meant, but to ourselves, that was going on. So it built my practice, and in a very short time, I was seeing 50 a week, then 100 a week, then 125 a week, then 150, 175. I broke 200. And then I started bringing in associates, and I had 2 great associates. They went on to build their own practices. But then I had 3 that just totally, like they didn't even want to be chiropractors. But that also caused my practice to hit the ground. And I realized that I had to do some other things. And this was at a time, again, when we didn't even have websites. It was just a brand new thing.
Yeah.
So I built my first website. It was so terrible that I hired a company to build my website for me. But then I met a guy at a B&I group, and I said, how do I get my website on page 1? And he said, oh, you can't. And for some reason, this huge BS meter just popped in my brain saying, no, it can be done. And so I went through and I studied and I read and I got certified, and I learned not only how to get my website on page 1, but how to dominate the first 2 pages of Google for my area. So If you were to type in, chiropractor in my area, I was the only one on there for the first 2 pages. It was awesome, just all the stuff that I'd learned. And then, of course, Google algorithms came in and just cleaned up a whole bunch of that stuff.
Of course.
But then it was like, okay, what else can I do? And so there are literally 5 things that you can do to jump in and own page 1 in different ways. You may not have the first 10 spots, but if you have the first or second spot and the third and the fifth and the seventh, and not necessarily your website, but links to your website through videos, through reviews, those kinds of things. So that's what I started doing and building. And it's like, this is great. Other chiropractors need to know about it. So that's when I created my own marketing company. And that's kind of where I am right now.
That's a fantastic story. I mean, that could be the whole episode right there, Jerry. I want to thank you for being on the show today.
Hey, it's been great.
First of all, I have to say a few things about this. Will Workers, there's so much in just Jerry's story alone here that we really need to take note of some of these things and really see what it is that we can learn from. But there isn't a better story in existence in chiropractic than having been born in Davenport, Iowa, not to mention having a father in chiropractic. But what seems ideal actually wasn't ideal for Jerry, because though his dad had a tried-and-true system, I love his theory, by the way. As long as you have a busy Monday, this is true of these old, tenets that the old guys used to have. And I love the ironic twist that Jerry was a magician, but he couldn't wave the magic wand to particularly grow a practice. You can't use sleight of hand when it comes to that.
Easy.
Absolutely. But until he was able to actually get trained in it. And at that point, it's like waving a magic wand, but it's really not magic at all. There's a technology to it. I like also what you said about where you jump, a net will form, because it's almost like if you build it, they will come. And there's a lot of truth to those statements. A lot of people think they're very cliche or trite, but if you're going to go gangbusters and you're going to be all in and you go all the way, you're going to make it. That's what it takes to make it. Ask anyone who's made it, and they will let you know they took that jump and they took it with enough certainty that a net did form. They not only knew a net would form, but it just did. And actually, it's a little bit ironic that you also told your consultants that if you fail, it'll be their fault, because you were trying to make the point that, hey, look, I'm going to be so all in that it won't be possible for me to fail. And that's really the bold statement that you made to them. Whereas a lot of people actually hire consultants to be able to have someone to blame for the failure they know they're bound for. If you know you're bound for failure, you will fail. And the other thing I want to point out, being 200 miles outside your comfort zone. People always say, I'm out of my comfort zone. You think slightly, but when you talk about 200 miles, okay, you're talking a lot. And then spending 40 hours treating patients and 30 hours out doing screenings. This is the stuff it's made of, Will Workers. This is the stuff that it takes to make it. If you remember back to episode 17, when nothing seems to work, ... If you haven't listened to that one, definitely go back and listen to it. That is all about persistence, and it's about the fact that, look, if it didn't work, just wait longer. It's right around the corner, and most people give up before that. And Jerry had the foresight to really do that. I love the clicker. I may steal the clicker idea from you, Jerry, because if you start out with a track record where you know you're a 10% closer, then you have to screen 100 people if you want 10 closed. At least if you know your skill set of what you can do, then you can play a numbers game to that degree. And Jerry obviously did that. And just to get those 3 patients, he made sure he said hello to those 100 people, just to get those 3 patients. And obviously he worked on his quality over time. The only depressing thing would be if Jerry had done nothing to learn how to do it better over time, and he tried to build his whole career over the course of 30 or 40 years or what have you on just getting 3 patients out of 100 people, he would have never made it 10 years. He would have just dropped over from exhaustion at that point. So when somebody tells you it can't be done, and the fact that you stuck to it, Jerry, first of all, I want to commend you for that, because when we finally do become of that mindset that we can get it done, we can do this thing that has previously been believed to be impossible, the first thing you're going to hit up against is the naysayers. And you got to have that BS detector. So I want to thank you for that.
Well, that's so true. You were talking about as far as being a magician and not having a magic wand. Well, what makes the magic wand work with a magician is all of his dedication and training and that knowledge and just that internal showmanship. And one of the things that I had is during my downtime is I read a ton of books, all about Zig Ziglar and Tony Robbins and Bill George, Finding True North, and the E-Myth. And I had all of that stuff inside me, but I knew that all it took was just that drive. And one of my branding phrases that I used is, when you're on fire, people will come to watch you burn. And that's kind of how I felt. It's kind of a breakup of what John Wesley said. He was the Georgia Savannah preacher, but I love that phrase. And so that's true. When you are on fire, people will pick that up and know. And these screening sites that I went to, there were times I'd be back on my 5th time, and that person I saw the very first time that I said hi to would finally come back and say, I've seen you here a while, and you're right, this is something I need to have a look at. And so the fairs that I would do, or the health talks, people would walk up and just say, hey, you're that chiropractor I saw. What can you do for my neck pain? Or, I've got a daughter with a problem. So all of that stuff, each one of those hellos was like a little seed for the future. And that's how I looked at it as well.
Brilliant analogies. I love the analogy about the magician and the magic wand, because it really is an illusion. And when you wave that magic wand, there's a lot of technology and a lot of skill that had to be developed behind it. And all of the follow-up analogies that you gave. Also, ironically, I just had coffee with a good friend of mine. She had a job with a very big company for a while that she liked, and she moved on to what she felt was a move into an area that she really liked. With this new company, better salary, less travel, a lot more work from home, and just a more ideal job. But what happened to her over the ensuing months was that she found out the job wasn't what she thought it was going to be. And most people would have bailed within their first few months or within the first year. She hung in there, and she was just telling me a story today. The exact description of what she thought this position was going to be had opened up in the company, and it looks like she's up for this job. And I actually commended her. I said, look, most people would have bailed soon after they found out that barrier. I was like, but I really want to commend you. You hung in there and created that opportunity for yourself. And now you're going to get the job that you wanted. And she couldn't stop smiling. But, there's another testament to persistence. So I just wanted to share that, Will Workers, that happened about 2 hours before this interview. Jerry, I'd like to get a little deeper into practice. What does your practice scenario look like these days? What does your practice picture look like right now in 2017?
Well, currently we have kind of minimalized the floor space of the clinic so that every single square foot has a purpose. It's just there as a function. And so we've got people doing massage, we've got tables for adjusting, we've got a little therapy suite. Our front desk is just big enough for 2 people to work, and that's also where all the billing and stuff is done. So we can minimize our square footage as far as our rent and things like that. But then also we have a semi-closed room. We have 4 adjusting bays, and there's just movable walls. So that way we can move everything open and do a marketing event if we're doing like a new patient orientation class or patient appreciation day, where we bring in a speaker that wants to talk about health products, those kinds of things. So it's a very movable system as well. The current status as far as how we bring in new patients, we've got our road sign. We have both digital and in-print marketing. So we've got people coming in from things that we're sending out from our website. We've got what we call review videos. We also have other types of digital assets that people get to when they're looking on an article, for example, on how to get rid of a headache. Then they can read some things, but as a result of that, there's a link and they click to it, and it either takes them to a landing page to get more information, or it gets them right back to where we are at the clinic. They can either call or leave their information. We've got things internally for people. If they want to leave a review, they can do that readily as far as reputation management. There are internal things that we do as people get adjusted. So after the first adjustment, there's a special thing that we say. Basically, every time we've got our hands on them and we're getting them adjusted, we're also talking to them about chiropractic. We're not talking to them about the football team or off topic. We have magazines in the clinic that are only chiropractic based. And so we have the whole focus on health. And that's what people love, is just our focus on that. And I tell them, we're going to be running around, be very busy. But if you have a question you need to ask me, ask it. That's why I'm here. We're here as a team. We're here to get you better. And they'll come to me with some sort of a prescription that their doctor gave them, their medical doctor. And I'll walk through it and show them exactly what the adverse side effects are. And people are coming to us now, and they tell their people, I get more information from my chiropractor than I do from my medical doctor for the things I'm being treated for. And that's the kind of presence that we want to have in our community.
I am pretty blown away by that description. The biggest thing that sticks out with me from that is focus on health. Will Workers, I have never seen a more shining example of this. What Jerry has done in his practice is not only utilize every square foot, but according to him, they don't even talk to the patients about football. It's health. The magazines, the space, every square foot of that place is utilized for a purpose and part of his overall purpose. No distractions, every single patient. And those vital minutes being spent with that patient, no minute is wasted. I think that's an example that we can all follow. This is what you call an on-purpose practice. Focused, I think, is the watchword. Jerry, that's brilliant. Thank you so much for that. And obviously, there's a lot of innovation there. The things that you developed and how you were able to come out of this ancient age and into a digital age. And obviously, you've taken full advantage of doing that, coupled with your purpose and your drive to do this. It's a 1-2 punch. So can you tell me about specifically some of those innovations that you developed? Because I know this is leading us into the fact that you do help other doctors do same.
Sure. It's a combination of three. It's called a 10 by 10, and the other one is basically getting a book published. And then also there are the things that we use in the spinal screenings. And so the first one started with just putting together a series of videos, 10 frequently asked questions, or the 10 FAQs, and then the 10 SAQs, which is should ask questions. And each one of those was 2 to 3 minutes most, all packaged up, put it on a website. And if people wanted to know more, they could put their name and email in, and then it got sent to our clinic. But each of those videos is kind of a standalone marketing system that goes out onto the web. And so if somebody sees that video, they can click on it, takes them back to the main page where they can opt in and see all 20 videos, or they can get more information on the clinic. And from that 10 and 10 came to 20 chapters for the ebook that I made, which has helped me eliminate this pain. And getting that put together, written, published, getting it into Amazon, becoming an Amazon author, having it be part of the Kindle system, and being printed as a hard copy. Again, that was a whole system that became certified in how to do that. And from that is internal promotion. So any new patient that comes in gets one of those books for free. We have them printed out. But also, if I want to go do a speaking engagement, I can walk in or I can mail it and just say, hey, I'm Dr. Dreesen. Here's my book. I'd like to come in and do a talk about this book that I've published. And it's number 1 in the category of health. And when they see that, it's like it's a step up. It's not just a chiropractor down the corner, but it's a published author. And, they can go to Amazon and they can see my author page. And so it's this whole thing, what we call building your ubiquity footprint, or what we call you everywhere. And so that started taking off. And then the other one is when we're out marketing, if you don't have time to talk to a whole group of people, we use what's called networking without a business card, or I also call it the electronic fishbowl. So if you're doing a screening and you're doing put your name in here for a drawing, or if you're at an event and there's just too many people going by, there's this system that's just a marvelous system. It's a way for people to get data without even having to talk to you. And if you can imagine doing a talk in front of everybody, in fact, I'm going to do it right now. I'll tell people to take their cell phones out, and those of you listening to the podcast, you can do this too. And then you can send a text message, and it goes to the number 58885, and then What you're doing is you're going to text the word Dr. Jerry, Drjerry, and you can experience what this is all about. And if you're at a screening site, it can be the same thing. And now the person's going to get a text back asking for their email, asking for their first name, and it's going to send them a link to the website where they can download whatever you want to give them. And in our case, it's a new patient orientation. It's the consult and exam for free, or they can do a new patient special. But now it gets them into what we call an autoresponder. And you can put as many as 1,000 autoresponders in there. You can just have it be 15, 20. You can do a whole year's worth of emailing. And they have the ability to opt into this. So it's all what we call legal or white hat. So it's an opt-in system. But just with those tools, if you can imagine doing a screening and it's like, oh, I don't have time to do this right now. You can say, hey, get your phone out, or you can hand them your iPad. There's about 8 other ways to do it. They can call a number and just say their name and spell out their email, and it'll grab it. So just this huge burst of technology that's there, just waiting for us to use it to help more people get better when we're in a situation where we can't see everybody all at once. If you've got a talk or a big screening, if you've got a poster up in the air, don't have time to stop by, text Dr. Jerry to 58885, and people going by, they can do that now. Whereas before, when I started, we didn't have the time. We'd say, well, if you get in line there, you can be next. They go, well, I don't have time, and off they go. So this is another way of helping to reel in those people that you would have otherwise missed during your event. Probably it helps with 30 to 40% of our new patients that come in. Those of you listening, if you're not tracking how each one of your new patients come in, you're missing out on a golden opportunity to help tweak your system. But that's what we do.
I like the whole idea of the ubiquity footprint and you everywhere, because that's really what it is. And I think this is the boat that sort of gets missed in marketing and practices. Well, workers, you go out there and you say, I'm going to go out and do screenings, or I'm going to digitally market, or I'm going to do Facebook ads. You tend to forget about the fact that you need to be everywhere. And I think that's the biggest challenge people face, and probably why they give up, because it's just very frustrating. It's hard to be everywhere. And I see how your innovation has gone there. Tell me something, Jerry. You said something to me in the pre-show interview that intrigued me. You talked about finding your true north and how this related to your journey. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
I think that for you to know that you're heading in the right direction, we call it true north. And that means that everything that you are there for makes sense to you, and that there's no distractions. And when you find your true north, you're definitely going to know it. And chances are everybody listening knows what their true north is. Just even write it down on a 3x5 card and review. It's just kind of goal setting. And I learned early on that the more focused your goal, it's kind of like a knife. The sharper the knife, the deeper the penetration, but also you can focus in on the exact pinpoint spot on the target. So the broader it is, the harder the penetration, and you're not quite getting what you need. So if you can really sharpen in exactly what it is that you want, then you can go after it, and all of the resources needed to get it will happen.
Nothing is more inspiring than that, to be honest. And I think that's something you should have on your wall when you wake up in the morning. It should be on the wall in your office and on the wall in your patient treatment rooms and whatever. As a coach or a consultant, I would say it's true for chiropractors in practice. And as a miracle chiropractic success story, I would say it's true for anyone. It's true for patients too, finding that true north. Jerry, what's been the biggest challenge, would you say? I'm going to put you on the spot here. What's been the biggest challenge that you've faced practice building over all these years?
Not being able to clone myself. But I mean, it's time, because what happens is you're going to put a ton of time into marketing, and then you're going to get a ton of new patients, and now you're busy being a doctor, and you're treating your patients, and now you don't have time to market.
Yeah.
But you want to be able to market your brand the way you want to, and so that time that you could go out and shake hands and talk with somebody, it's less. And they're not going to be around at 6:30 when you come out of your clinic, or they're not going to be in their office before 7 when you're getting up and you're reviewing your goals and things like that. So it's trying to create a balance between all of that, coordinating all of that time so that it flows properly. Those are definitely the challenges, because your clinic even though it's set up to run like a well-oiled machine, there's going to be fires. And you have to have the patience and the ability to handle that fire and to put it out with calmness, because the rest of your crew is watching it. And if you freak out at the smallest spark, then they're going to freak out. But if you can handle everything in a real calm, cool manner, knowing that this is just something that needs to be taken care of, and always err on the side of righteousness and on the side of good, those are probably some solutions to it. But I would say the true answer to that is time is definitely the enemy, because there's just not enough of it.
Thank you for that. And that leads me into my next question, which is, what would you say is the foremost lesson you've learned all these years, getting into practice, failing in practice, rebuilding a practice, succeeding in practice, helping other doctors? Like, what would you say is the foremost lesson you've learned in your journey so far?
Well, what keeps me going every day is the look on a patient's face when you are diagnosing, let's say somebody has a headache and you feel their neck and you find that subluxation and you touch it and you go, that's the source of your problem. This is before they had any chance to tell you anything about it. And the look on their face is like, how did you know that?
Wow.
And then when you adjust them and then their headache goes away, the look on their face again is like, nobody's ever been able to do that. You just did it. In my opinion, when you're skilled as good as chiropractors get, we make it look so easy. Again, tying it into a magic trick. When a magician does an illusion, does close-up magic, it just looks flawless. And yet they don't realize all of the hard work it took to get to that point to present that and make that miracle happen. And so to me, that's what drives me to do all this. It's like, I've done it with myself. I enjoy it. I want to help others in my profession do it as well. And so not only do I have this marketing agency, but I'm also taking the 5 to 10 different adjustments that I've learned through my years that weren't taught in school, so that I can also teach other chiropractors techniques that I've used that work really well.
Well, workers, I have to say Jerry's foremost lesson is a lesson for all of us. And the one thing that I really want to pull out of that, in addition to all the adjusting techniques and all of that stuff, when it really comes down to it, it's touching that patient and saying, this is the source of your problem, is what it's all about, and why we're all here doing what we do. It's the whole purpose I'm sitting here podcasting and interviewing Jerry today, and all my other guests, and all the ranting and raving I've done in some of my solo episodes that you've had to endure, for better or for worse. But here is a lesson that we can all learn from, that we tend to forget when we get caught up in trying to be on page one, and caught up in saying, I'm competing with my fellow chiropractor up the street, in trying to just get ahead and trying to keep the visits above 50 or 75 every week. We forget about this, and that's what really drives the most successful practices, is that deep-seated purpose to use this power that we have to actually get people well, where they've been told it's been impossible. And we're the actual solution in the face of that. Purpose is really what it comes down to. Jerry, thank you so much for that. That was just very beautifully stated, and high five for that.
You're welcome.
You know, we're getting close to the end of the episode here, and what I'd like to know from you is this. What would be, considering all of what you talked about today, your biggest challenges, your foremost lessons, the finding the true north, and, you know, the things that your dad told you, and in all of that time, what would be the one piece of advice you would give any practicing wellness professional, be it a newbie who's just getting into practice, starting, or even somebody who's well into their career and maybe trying to turn things around or whatever? What would be like one piece of advice that you would give in terms of really turning the game in their favor?
Actually, it's kind of twofold, because in order to be a chiropractor, you already have to have the passion to want to help people and to come out graduated as a chiropractor. But the one thing they don't teach us is how to market. And so how do you go out and market yourself in a way that's respectable? But also, what people don't realize is that there's only 20% of the chiropractors out there marketing, and there's 80% of the people out there that don't know anything about chiropractic. So there really isn't any competition. And so to go out there and learn all of it, that's definitely a big drink out of a fire hose for that too. So I would say try and do what you can to get like good reviews, to get your patients talking about you that way, so that when other people are searching for you, they can find reviews. And like for me, it was the video review system that I learned, and getting, 5-star reviews up and online outside of Yelp. That kind of builds your digital assets to start with. And that way, it's how you can start marketing for yourself 24 hours a day, 7 days a week without actually having to be there. But then now you've got things to fall back on. So as you're meeting patients, and you can say, well, go tell your friend to go pull up the clinic name and review, and they can learn a little bit more about us. And then you can start doing that outside marketing, but pick one thing and focus on that first and get it going, and then set it aside and go to the next one. So try not to, at the start, do a shotgun approach. Just narrow your focus, pick one thing, get it done, and go. I never would have written my book if I hadn't stopped everything and just focused on that for 3 months, got it going, got it published, and then went on to the next thing. So I think that would be it, is with all the stuff that's out there, pick one thing and go for it. But pick the one thing and go for it is something that once it's done, it can be added to your arsenal as you're moving forward to your next step.
Fantastic. Way more than I was even expecting from you, Jared, so thank you so much for that.
No problem.
And now for the last word. Who gets the last word? I do. After all, it's my show. What should you take away from today's episode? If anything, I'd like you to take to heart one thing. That it ain't over till it's over, Will Workers, that's for sure. When it comes to your chiropractic or wellness practice goals, just because it didn't work out in practice so far doesn't mean it won't. Jerry knew what he wanted to do, and when things didn't work out the way he planned, what did he do? Did he give up and go into something else? No. He took his original inspiration and refused to believe otherwise than the fact he would accomplish it, and retooled and changed. Like Jerry said, jump and a net will form. Focus everything on it and center around it. Find your true north, and while you're at it, create that ubiquity footprint. Don't you just love that? What you should take to heart is what you hold closest to your heart, your purpose, and keep reminding yourself of it as you work every possible avenue to get there, even if it means starting over. You too can live the dream if you keep it in front of you and moving toward it any way you can. And that is what I truly wish for you. Jerry, it's really been awesome having you here today. This is the part of the show where I usually hook up our audience with our guests, so I would like them to be able to reach out to you. I would like you to mention a little bit about some of the products you have, but just know that I'm going to be putting all of that on your episode page in the show notes. And that will be at willwork4patients/digital assets.
Probably the best thing to do is use a program where they can get in touch with me and actually schedule a time. And it's Jerry Dreesen, that's DREESSEN .youcanbook.me. And you can actually click on a time and we can get together. And what I'd like to do for anybody that's listening to the podcast is I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of people, and they've been able to get me a spot where I can write posts for the Huffington Post as a guest author. And what I'd like to do is to create a Huffington Post article about each of you, just asking you some basic questions. And it'll give you an initial start where you can take that and link it onto your website where you're being quoted in the Huffington Post. So if you want to do that, that's open for you as well. And I have at least 5 products that would help out all of practices. And you can find more about each of those at the link that Frank's giving you.
Once again, willwork4patients.com/digital assets. Jerry, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. I can't thank you enough. You've been one of the most inspiring guests that I've had so far on the show, and I've had some pretty inspiring ones. I want to thank you for sharing those stories with us. Your innovation itself is inspiring. The things that you've innovated for your own practice and that you're reaching out to help other doctors to do that now. Keep on keeping on, Jerry. That's all I can say. But thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
And thanks for having me on, Frank.
You bet. I'm sure we'll be asking you back, so hopefully you'll be glad to come back on the show.
Would love to do it.
So, my friends, we've come to the end of a true Northbound episode. On behalf of myself, my guest, Dr. Jerry Dreesen, and the rest of the Screening Experts crew, I thank you so very much for being here, and we'll see you next time for another Kickstart episode of Will Work for Patients. So long.
Be sure to subscribe and share. Will Work for Patients has been brought to you courtesy of Screening Experts, bringing unscripted simplicity to chiropractic marketing complexity. Today's episode, copyright Screening Experts LLC, musical score composed and arranged by Frank Sardella ASCAP. For more information, visit screeningexperts.com.